Hello everyone. Welcome to another Worm Farm Q&A Live on White Baby Gardening and Worm Farm. Today we're going to be discussing microbes and a lot more topics. We'll be answering some questions that were asked regarding worm farming. Feel free to take part in the discussion, or you can just listen in on the side if that's what you prefer. If you have questions, go ahead and ask, and you can share your experiences as well. So hi Han White. How is your day going so far? Can you close the door as well, please? Thank you. Sorry about that. Oh, hi, Sian. Okay, your day is going good. That's great. Yeah, so we're gonna start off by discussing the differences between compost and castings because a lot of times these two expressions are being used interchangeably. Oh my, I'm doing okay. Yes, I'm okay. Looking forward to the growing season, and it is pretty sunny and bright outside, so I think that is making me feel a bit perky or happy. Yes. Yeah, so as I was saying, a lot of time the term compost and the worm castings are used interchangeably, but they are actually not the same thing. Compost is just a natural breakdown of organic matter. It does not involve the use of worms. Castings, however, is food scraps and other organic matter that have been fed to your worms, and when the worms process it, their excrement is actually the worm casting. So there's a difference between the two. So if you want to refer to castings as compost, then vermicompost would be the right term to use. So the difference between castings and compost, we're going to be discussing them a little bit further in the discussion. One of the main thing about castings where it differ from compost is because of the microbes that it contains and the amount of nutrients that it contains. Now, this is a question that I get asked sometimes. If I am using compost in my garden, do I still need to use castings? Here are several points regarding the compost and the castings. Castings has more nutrients. It has at least 5 times more nutrients and microbes than the compost does. So if you're using compost, then you're getting less nutrients from your plants. It will supply your plants with a reasonable amount of nutrients, but if you're using worm casting with it, then your plants is going to be getting more nutrients. Now, the nutrients in compost get depleted faster than the nutrients that are found in castings. Now, this is because when the worms consume the organic matter, as the food passes through their alimentary canal, it becomes encapsulated by the liquid that is in the stomach of the worms or in the alimentary canal of the worms. Now, this liquid or solution takes 2 months to break down. As it breaks down, it slowly releases the nutrients that are found in the worm castings. So, for that reason, when you had worm castings to your garden, the nutrients from the castings will take 2 months to be fully released. Which means that if you're using castings, then you can use less castings than if you were using compost, but you can use both of them together. One of the good thing about the worm casting, both the compost and the casting is able to trap moisture, but the worm casting is able to hold moisture longer than the compost. So you can use either one or the other, or you can use both. It doesn't really matter much. But if you're trying to get the maximum benefit out of your garden or the maximum yield out of your garden, then using worm casting would be a very positive move. What do you guys use in your garden? Do you use compost? Do you use animal manure? Do you use worm casting? Do you use a combination of all of these? What do you use? For me, I only use compost and worm castings. And the truth is, if I had enough worm castings, I would not be using compost in my garden. I feed the compost to my worms. When worms eat, and why it says I use compost and castings, okay. When worms eat food scraps and other organic matter, you look beautiful. Oh, thank you. When worms eat organic matter, irrespective of what they're eating and irrespective of whether the nutrients that the plant need is found in the food scraps, the worms, oh, hi Melanie, the worms actually convert whatever they're eating into the nutrients that your plants need. So practically all the nutrients that your plant need can be found in the worm castings. How are you doing, Melanie? Yes. So what happens if castings get frozen? I've touched on this point before in one of my lives, but I'm going to be expounding on it a little bit more. So, you know, it is said that you should not freeze your castings. And it is said that compost, when it freezes, when it thaws, it is still just as good as it was before. The same is true of your castings, except for one thing. The microbes in your castings will die, but all of the nutrients that was in the castings before will still remain in the castings. So your plants still will benefit from your castings. Of course, if you're selling your castings, then I'd recommend that you do not sell castings that was frozen, because the person who is buying your casting, they're not just buying it for the nutrients that is in the castings, or else they could just go and get compost. So they're buying it both for the nutrients and for the amount of microbe that it contains. So if you're selling your castings, then I wouldn't recommend selling the one that was frozen. That would be like cheating your clients. Let's see. Melanie says, great. Okay, you're doing great. Finally got my seeds. Yay! When do you start planting or sowing those seeds? Are you going to be starting them indoors? What if you give your worms food scraps, which is non-organic? Would your garden still be an organic garden? If you give your worms food scraps that are not organic, most of the stuff that is found in that material the worms can break down, but that depends on what chemical is in there, and we don't really know all the chemicals that are used to treat plants. Oh, hi, Mom. Yes, so we do not know all the chemicals that are used to fertilize or to treat pests on your plants, but most of the stuff that you give to your worms, they can break it down. So, will it be still organic? That's a question I'm going to have to research and get back to you on. I know that a lot of it will be broken down, but as to just how much I cannot say at the moment. Maybe I should jot that down so I can remember. I have a professor in the States that I communicate with from time to time regarding worms. So I'm going to see if he has ever come across this question or if he has ever done this research. And I'm going to be contacting the university here in Saskatoon and to see if they have ever done this research. And then I'll get back to you with the answer. I don't know how long it will take for them to get back to me, but I'll get back to you with the answer. Oh, hi, Rodney. How is your afternoon going? You're welcome, Ann White. Yeah, so as I was saying regarding whether or not you can still use your frozen casting in your garden, yes, it still has all the nutrients in it. It just doesn't have the microbes once it's allowed to freeze. Let's see, Rodney says, going great. Heading to the greenhouse to check on worms now. Oh, lovely. Okay, so can mites and springtails and other insects in your worm bin survive in harvested castings? To an extent, yes, but it's only for a short period of time. As you know, the finished castings after it has been sifted will contain a small amount of unprocessed material. And so whatever eggs from the worms or insects are in that castings, they're going to be feeding on the remaining organic matter. Now, these insects do not feed on your worm castings, they only feed on the organic matter that is in it. So once they deplete that organic matter, then they are either going to exit the castings or they will eventually die off. Oh, hi, New York Gardener. Yes, so they will either exit the castings or they will eventually die off. So they cannot survive for a very long period of time in your worm castings. How many of you use worm castings in your garden? And if you have never used it before, are you thinking of using worm casting in your garden? It is definitely worth it, especially if you can produce your own as opposed to buying. But if you can produce your own, then buying is a good idea because the benefits that you get from castings far outweighs the benefit that you get from compost and other organic matter. And I like the fact that the worm castings does not burn your plants. You know, when you use animal droppings like cow dung and stuff like that, it can burn your plants. I love the fact that the worm casting does not burn plants. It doesn't matter how much you use or if you put it directly against your plant, worm casting just does not harm your plants. Let's see, Sian says she uses it and so does Ann White. Okay, good. Oh, Melanie said, never did, but I'm open to it. Yes. It's a very good idea, and I love the fact that it also helps to protect your plants from some pathogens. Yeah, so if you're able to, you should try it. Okay, Rodney says, I haven't used it yet, but will this spring. Nice. How do you mix it or just place it on the surface? You can place it on the surface. If you are amending your soil, then you can pour it on the surface, and then as you till your soil, you till it into the soil. But to amend your soil, you will need to have a large amount of it. If not, then you'll just have to keep adding it each year until your soil is amended to what you want it to be. So you can use it either by placing it on the soil, by mixing it in the soil. You can, when you are going to plant, the holes, for each hole, you put some in the holes that you're planting in. You can use it to make worm tea and then use the tea to water the plants. Of course, you're not watering the foliage with it, you're watering the root of the plant. But it doesn't really matter if it goes on the foliage, but the root of the plant is what you want to get most of the benefit. There was a point I was going to make about that question, but I forgot. My brain is getting old. It's not waiting for me. Second year gardeners still have a lot to learn. Yes, there's so much to learn. It doesn't matter how long you have been gardening, there is always just so much to learn. But you know what? The best way to learn is from experience. Oh, yes, now that Rodney, you mentioned worm tea, so I remember what I was going to say. If you are going to be making worm tea, you can either put the casting in a pail of water and just let it sit, or you can stir it occasionally, or if you have a pump that you can use, you can just put the pump in the solution and let it aerate the liquid. The more you aerate the liquid, whether by stirring or by using a pump, the more microbes you're going to have in the worm tea. And as we're going to be discussing microbes a little further on in the discussion, you're going to see why the more microbes, the better it is for your garden. Yes. And then one of the benefits of the worm tea is when you start plants indoors, sometimes you don't really have a lot of space to add nutrients, like solid nutrients to your plants. Sometimes you might start your seedlings early, and then you have a long period that you have to wait before you can actually transplant your seedlings. And so you have to be topping up with fertilizer, whether organic or otherwise. The worm tea is ideal because you're using the worm tea both to water the plants and to supply nutrients at the same time. So this is one thing that I really like about worm tea. So when it comes to this time of year, I'm always making my worm tea. Your worm tea, however, have a shelf life of 3 days, only 3 days. After that, it is no longer potent unless, of course, you keep it aerated for however long you have it. But you have to make sure that you keep aerating it, or else the microbes in it will die off because they need both moisture and air in order to survive. Let's see, and why it says, I will be making worm tea this spring. Okay, yeah. So do you sell worm casting? If so, do you? I'm tongue tied. Do you sell worm castings? If so, do you ship to the States? Um, yes, I do sell worm castings. I do ship to the States, but it can be expensive depending on how close or how far you are from me. Shipping can be expensive. Sometimes it might work out cheaper to get from a local supplier. I'm going to have my castings on Amazon sometime this year, but it's not for now. But even if it is on Amazon, I don't ship my castings to Amazon and then let it stay there and wait for someone to order, because then your castings can dry out, and I don't really like the idea of selling castings that have dried out to my clients. It will have the nutrients that it needs in it, but it won't have a lot of microbes. So I don't really like the idea of having the castings sitting there waiting for someone to purchase it. I like to keep it with me because when I do that, I can keep it moist at all times. Okay, so let's see. Rodney says, could you freeze worm tea? Again, just like with your worm castings that you would not freeze, because although it maintains the nutrients, the microbes do die off. You wouldn't want to freeze your worm tea because the microbes will die off. Will it be on Amazon by spring? I am not quite sure yet. I'm working on that, but I'm having a little bit of issue with packaging because I want to ensure that the package that I use is breathable. Finding the size container that I want is a bit tricky because I want to do 5 gallon packaging and 1 gallon packaging, but it can be a bit tricky finding breathable containers to package to use. And I was thinking of using buckets, but they are a bit expensive to buy. So, yeah. I live in the southern parts of the US, so very far from you. Okay. Were you affected by the storm? I don't know anything about north, south, east, or west of the US, so I don't know what part is close to me or furthest from me. But anyway, were you guys affected? Those of you in the States, were you affected by the storm? Okay. Now, why should you keep your casting moist? I kind of touched on it um, briefly. Yes, so much snow. Okay. But you're doing okay though, right? Quite a few of the people I follow were showing how badly they were affected by the storm. Some got a lot of snow. I know that one lady in Texas, she said that a lot of them are without power. She got power, but there are quite a lot still without power, and she has no internet and stuff. So, and they have to be boiling the water because of contamination. But thankfully, it seemed as if there were only 30 casualties so far. I'm hoping that it won't be more than that. And my condolences to those families that are suffering at the moment. Let's see. I am in Georgia and we just got a lot of rain. Oh, that's a vast difference. Eh? Some are getting snow, some are getting rain, some are getting winds. That must be a vast difference in temperature. Yes, just not used to this much snow. How much snow did you get? And Rodney, were you able to catch some of that rainwater for your garden or your worms? Speaking of which, I need to go and dig out my barrels out of the snow. I need to start collecting some snow to have them melted so I can use them for my garden this spring. I do that every year. Yeah, so we were talking about why the castings need to be kept moist, and it is because microbes live in moist condition and they thrive best in moist condition. If their environment is allowed to dry out, they will die off, and so it is important to keep them moist. Do you need to stir harvested castings from time to time? Not really. This is a question that some beginners ask, but the answer is that you don't really have to. But if you're able to do so, then it can be beneficial in the sense that your castings will be aerated, and that is good for both the castings and whatever hatchlings you might have in your castings. So it is beneficial, but it is not necessary. Maybe less than an inch every 2 years, every 2 to 3 years. Okay, but that's not bad. That's not bad. The first snowstorm we got here in early October this year, some places in my yard had 2 feet of snow, and some places still have 3 feet of snow from that snowstorm. So that's not too bad. But again, if you're not used to it, then it can seem like it's the worst thing ever, right? Oh, hi, Russell. I reuse bread bags for a gallon at a time. Okay. Sometimes poke small holes in the bags. Okay, that's a pretty good idea. It's actually a good idea. Now we have over 2 feet. Holy moly, that's a lot. Yeah, if you're only used to a few inches every couple of years, and now you have 2 feet, that can be overwhelming. Um, in the last 11 years, this snowfall is the worst we have ever had. In fact, I've never experienced any snowstorm like this, and I was unable to get out through the main door of my house because the snow was banked 2 feet high on my stairs, so my door could not open. Thankfully, I was able to get out through the front door. So, yeah, but there are a lot of people who were actually snowed in. They could not get out. They had to call for help. Yeah, 2 feet it can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. But that's a good idea, Russell, using the bread bag. And then I'm also working on labeling. So I'm still trying to figure out the best way to make labels because I want my labels to come with instructions so that the client can know how to use the worm castings and stuff like that. So I'm working on labeling, but figuring out I want to make my own label. I don't really want to outsource it. So I'm working on that. Couldn't open your back door either. Yeah. This year has been crazy where weather is concerned. It's either it is extremely hot during the winter or it is extremely cold, but everything is just out of the norm. But then that is life. We just have to live and adjust to the circumstances, whatever it is. We can't give up. We just have to keep moving forward. Try to make the most out of it. Yes. So now we're going to be talking about those microbes that I've been promised to talk about. So, what are the benefits of microbes in your garden? To answer this question, I'm going to be talking about the 5 types of microbes and how they benefit your soil. Oh, thank you, Ann White. Yes. So there are 5 types of microbes that are found in your soil. You have fungi, you have bacteria, nematodes, protozoa, and actinomyces or seeds. So these are the 5 type of uh, microbes. My brain, oh my god. My brain seemed to be on holiday. I don't know why. Yes. So these are the five type of microbes. Now, the benefit of fungi in your soil is that they live in the root zone of your plant and they help to make nutrients available for your plants. So things fungi like mycorrhizae is one example that is very beneficial to the roots of your plants. Let's see. Melanie said, last year was my first winter in Niagara Falls and it was great. But this year, oh my God. Yeah, these are crazy times. When it's not health issues, it is weather. And these are things we just can't avoid. There's some things that we can take precautions to avoid, but there are just some things that you cannot avoid. But that is life, eh? I guess if life was the same way every day, it would be boring. So we do not like the changes, but at the same time, if we have to live the same way every day, we'll be bored. So I guess it has its negative and it has its positive. Okay, so, oh yes, point I need to jot down so I don't forget. Yes, so the next form of microbe in your soil is bacteria. Now, bacteria is considered to be one of the most beneficial living organism in your soil, and it is responsible for the final stage of breaking down nutrients so that your plant roots can have access to it. Nematodes. Now, there are many different types of nematodes, over 20,000 different species of nematodes. These are worms that live close to or inside your plants. They can either be parasitic or they can be beneficial. Melanie said, did you find out anything about the leaf miners? Oh my goodness, that one slipped my mind. I keep jotting down, but like I said, my brain is on holiday. So even though I'm making notes, I keep forgetting. No, I did not. I did not at all. You know what? I'm going to look it up right after this live so that I don't forget. Or at least keep the notes on the desk here so that it will be readily available. Once I see it, I will know that, okay, I need to get that done. Yes, I didn't get the chance to look up leaf miners. If any of you know how to wake up my sleeping brain, I'd be happy. Yes. Right. So, nematodes, the beneficial nematodes feed on pathogenic nematodes. And then the nutrients that these beneficial nematodes get from the pathogenic nematodes, they release it as nutrients for your plants to feed on. Now, protozoa is the next type of microbes. Now, these love to feed on bacteria and similar to the nematodes, similar to the nematodes, when protozoa feeds on bacteria, then the nutrients that they get from the bacteria is fed to your plants. So the protozoa actually benefit from the food or the organic matter that the bacteria feeds on. So the final type of of microbes are the Actinomyces. Now, these were once classified as fungus because they are similar and they have a similar functions in the soil as well. So some of them are parasitic while some of them are beneficial to your plants. The parasitic Actinomyces are harmful to plants, while the beneficial ones will act like antibiotic for your plants. So they have healing benefits for your plants. Now, beneficial microbes actually help with germination. So if you have beneficial microbes in your soil, then it will increase the rate at which your seeds germinate. It will help your plants to develop good root system. It will protect your plants from some pathogens, and it will help plants to absorb nutrients, thus improving both the taste and the yield of your produce. Bad microbes, however, can either damage or kill your plants, and it can also reduce your yield. So I'm going to address a few more questions that have been asked by a few beginner worm farmers. So one person wanted to know why after adding food to his worm bin, the worms have not been touching the food. For a month, the worm did not touch the food. So there are several reasons that could cause that. If the food scrap is very acidic, then the worms are going to do their best to avoid it unless there is nothing else for them to eat. If the food scrap is fresh, then the worms are going to feed on the older food scraps, because what they're feeding on is not the food scraps but the bacteria that is on the food scraps. So the fresh food scraps will have less bacteria, so they will go for the older one first, which is good because then the fresher one will have time to break down and produce enough bacteria for the worms to feed on. Now, the worms could also be feeding on the bedding that you have in your worm bin, and that could be the reason why they're not feeding on the food scraps just yet. Now, if the bin is overrun by some insects or by a lot of insects, then this too might cause the worms to shy away from the food scraps. So things like mites, especially the red mites in your worm bin, if you have a large population of them, then the worms will shy away. So these are some of the reasons why the worms may not be consuming the food scraps that are in the bin. Now, what can you do if your worms are not eating the food scraps fast enough? One, you can make sure that they're getting the right type of food. Let's see. Russell says, I ordered praying mantis eggs to release throughout the summer. Then I YouTubed praying mantis eggs. Now I'm telling myself, no, no, they are for outdoors. I was actually looking into doing so myself because they are such good predators for those pests in your garden, but unfortunately, I don't think they would do well in my environment, because where would I keep them when it is cold? Yeah, but it would be nice to have them because they do make a large impact on those pests. Yeah. So what can you do if you're to help your worms to eat faster? We want to make sure that you're feeding your worms the right type of foods. You have to don't keep adding food scraps. If the worms are not eating fast, don't keep adding food scraps, because this is going to make your bin acidic. It's going to be smelly. It's going to attract a lot of pests, especially the fruit flies and stuff like that. So allow them to work on the food scraps that is already in the bin, and Then after they have consumed a reasonable amount, then you can add more food scraps to it. Now, if your bin is smelly or moldy, then you might want to remove some of the food scraps that is in the bin, and like I said, allow them to finish what is there before adding more to it. Adding grit to your worm bin is also a good idea because, as you may know, the worms do not have teeth, they have gizzard. They don't really need teeth because they're not eating the food scraps, they're eating bacteria. So they don't need to chew anything. So because they don't have teeth and you want them to process the food scraps faster, you're going to add a grit to the worm bin, and you can use things like oyster oyster shell, which is finely crushed. You can use crushed eggshells. You can use fine grained sand and stuff like that as grit in your worm bin. You can even use soil depending on the type of soil. So this will help them to process the foods faster. If I want to start a worm bin, which worm would I get? Now that depends on several factors. You have to consider your climatic conditions. If you have do you produce a lot of food scraps or do you produce small amount of food scraps? So if you're looking for worms that can withstand certain temperatures, like say for example you're in a warmer environment, then you want to consider African night crawlers and blue worms because these are more tolerant to eat. If you are in a colder environment like where I am, then Canadian night crawlers are a good idea because these are the worms that are best at enduring cold. And if you are in moderate temperature where you experience both hot and cold, then you might consider European night crawlers and not Canadian, and red wrigglers. Red wrigglers are the most adaptable worms. They can tolerate sudden changes in temperature better than the other worms. They are very fast breeders and they consume a lot of food scraps. So if you're looking for some worms that will help you to process food scraps fast and breed fast, then red wigglers is the best way to go. Now, red wigglers are awesome, absolutely awesome. And if you want to know why I say that they're awesome, then please check out tomorrow's video. You're going to be amazed just as much as I was when I made this discovery. So, like I said, if you are in doubt as to which worm to get, red wigglers is your best bet. Okay, so I've exhausted all of the topics that I want to discuss with you today. So if there's anything you want to talk about, please feel free. And if not, then I'm going to be saying goodbye. Question: does anyone know? Oh, hello and goodbye. Does anyone know where I can get breathable fertilizer bag to purchase? I don't really know where to get them. Thanks for sharing. Okay, mom, you're welcome. Yes, I need some fertilizer bags that are breathable, but I don't know where to get them. The ones that I see, they are not the size that I want. I'm looking for breathable fertilizer bags. Yeah, I want some that are able to hold 5 gallons of material. Yes, fertilizer bag. Things I do for my garden. Yes. But I don't know where to find the size that I'm looking for, although I might have to compromise. But anything between 3 and 5 gallon would be pretty ideal. And then I'd rather have something that is biodegradable. The ones that I see comes from China, and you have to buy a great deal of them, and I don't really need that much. So yeah. They buy the bag in a big roll and use a heat sealer to make different sizes. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking about buying it in a roll, but I'm not seeing the type that I want. Maybe check the feed stores or a nursery. Yeah, that would be a good idea. Okay, thank you guys. Yeah, I look into getting some rolls because I have the heat sealer, but I'm not seeing the breathable type that I want. I'm just seeing plastic. So I'm going to have to keep searching, and I will be checking some nurseries and feed stores as well. Let's see, are you looking for a tough bag or just plastic like bags that's eco-friendly? I'm looking for bags that I can use to hold my worm castings, and I don't want something that when you're handling it, it's going to tear easily on you. So it doesn't really matter what type of bag, as long as it is eco-friendly and breathable and strong enough to be handled without tearing. What, do you know of any? Oh, do you know where I can source it? And do they sell online? But I need to go read the label for .com address. Okay. I guess I can just leave it in the comment section of this video. That would be great. That would be great. I'd appreciate that a lot. Thanks, May, Adrian. Okay, so if there are no other comments, I'm going to be ending this live. Thank you guys for your participation. It was good having all of you on the live. And I hope you, for those of you in the US who are experiencing this stormy season, I hope you will be safe and warm, and happy gardening. take care now. Okay, no problem. Good to see you going live. Okay, thanks.